Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon and good morning, and welcome to Asset Management Awareness Month 2025. Happy to have you here today. My name is Scott Ray. I am the Vice President of Seminars and Events for the MPMA, and just really excited to get AMAM 2025 underway. Before we begin today, I just wanted to touch on a few housekeeping items. First off, our presenter today, Peter Collins from ADB Tracking, will be taking questions at the end of his presentation. So if you do have a question that comes up throughout, go ahead and drop that question into the question box, and he will address that at the conclusion of his presentation. The slide deck for today, those of you interested in the slide deck, that is available in the handouts portion of, I guess this is GoToMeeting. So that is available in that section. The presentation today is being recorded, and it will be available on the NPMA's YouTube channel in about a month or so. So if you know someone who may be interested, who may have been interested in the presentation today, wasn't able to make it, got pulled away, whatever, it will be available on the NPMA's YouTube channel for future viewing. I think that is it in terms of general housekeeping announcements. One thing I would like to mention to everybody is to certainly visit the NPMA website and take a look at the AMAM or Asset Management Awareness Month webpage. On that page, we contain all of the, and you can see this is it right here. You can see all of the presentations for the month, when they're happening, what time, registration information, and everything that you'll need in order to attend each session. As you already may already know or may not know, each of these sessions over the next 4 weeks are completely free. The speakers that we have a really solid list of speakers presenting throughout the month. In fact, Peter opens us up this week, today, and then next week we have Dr. Doug Getz, who is presenting on the value of MPMA membership, how you can use the MPMA as a resource to navigate changes in the profession. We have a presentation the following, or that Thursday of the same week, next week, on the value of barcoding in a property management environment. We follow that up by sharpening your edge, essential aspects for professional development, and then close out the month with a presentation on fleet management. So really excited with the topics we have this year, really excited for all of our speakers. And I think everyone will be able to get something out of each seminar. So definitely jot down those questions you have, definitely get ready to take some notes. And without further ado, I think we can go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome in Peter Collins, who is presenting today. Peter is from ADB Tracking, and he is presenting on communication and the importance of communication up the chain. So with that, Peter, I just want to say thank you so much for agreeing to present, and I will turn everything over to you.
Oh, my pleasure, Scott. Hey, and just if I could get good to go on the comms to make sure the audio is working fine.
Good to go.
Thanks. Well, great. Well, I'm certainly very honored to be part of this kickoff of Asset Management Awareness Month. And, certainly also special thanks to Scott, you, and to Lisa and Dave behind the scenes that are making all of this possible. And, to NPMA for having me. It really is, I'll sort of do a lead in a preemptive on Doug's session next week, which is MPMA is really a fantastic organization to be part of. I've been a member myself as a technology provider in this particular space for this, area of industry for over 20 years now. And it's hard to believe 20 years have gone by, but being part of this and, you know, being dedicated and seeing the same faces and having, you know, really interesting discussions have really helped to advance the knowledge that my organization benefits from being part of NPMA. So great organization, and I appreciate it. Asset Management Awareness Month is a great time to continue to also sharpen the saw on your skills and your knowledge and reflecting on what's going to be important to you over the course of the next year. Before I get into this session, I believe we're going to launch a very brief poll here to get a sense of where people are with their technology in this government property management system space. So Lisa, if you care to launch that poll. So the question is, what best describes your current property management system? No wrong answer here. Whatever is the approach you take now, and you know, take a few seconds here to click whichever applies to you. But a system can mean many things, right? And it can mean technology, or it can mean more of a methodical approach. And we'll talk about what we see happening in the industry today and how you can advocate for advancing this capability within your organization. So especially if you feel like you're in a position where the workload is growing and you're being asked to be more efficient while managing all that increased workload, perhaps with no increase in labor and resources. This is a good session for you to reflect on where you are and ultimately where you want to be as you advance through the year.
Peter, are you ready for me to close the poll?
Ready to go. Ready to
All
good to
right.
go. Yep. Thanks for asking, Lisa. Great. Okay, so when asked the question, what describes your system approach to property management? Very low percentage is in a manual paper-based solution. We've got 7% using Excel spreadsheets still, and 13% with a homegrown system, and then 77% commercially available software. Great distribution, good data point to have going into this, so you can think about where you are compared to where you see your colleagues and other organizations in the industry. All right, so we can close that out and get into the session. So again, my name is Peter Collins. I'm the founder and CEO of A2B Tracking. A2B has been around providing asset management and government property management solutions for 30 years. Cloud-based is our focus. Secure and cloud-based solutions is the approach that we take, and a significant focus on automation for improving efficiency for those who use our tools. Now, what I want to start here, if you advance to the next slide, is I'd like to take a moment before I get into the motivations and really the messaging around what to take to leadership, is to think about your own role here as a property professional. One is that of, what does it mean really to be a change maker? And you know, change in that notion, of course, probably makes everybody a little squirmy. But what I want to outline here is some of the key things to be thinking about. So driving positive change is really the imperative of your job as property professionals to support your team. So the why behind doing it should be very clear to you, that you do need to continue to advance the way that you support your organization. And by doing that, one of the first steps is to, in fact, face the potential risks of change, right? The areas of concern that could be associated with it. And one thing that'll really elevate your own professionalism in the eyes of your leadership is if you can take the notion of change and bringing it to them and also share with them that you've thought out any areas of concern you may have with implementing this change, and quite frankly, adding risk mitigation strategies to those areas of concern. It doesn't need to be a hugely exhaustive list, but something that lets them know that you've been thinking holistically about the way that you would implement change inside your organization. So identifying those areas of concern and how you'd mitigate those concerns. Also, showing leadership that you've done your due diligence by proposing well thought out solutions. So by due diligence, what we mean is, evaluating the market for the various technologies that are available for you that really can meet your organization's needs and what you think, knowing how your organization operates, what you think will in fact work within the organization. So proposing those well thought out solutions. Of course, always communicating the benefits at each stage. When you're dealing with leaders and various stakeholders, it could be your IT department that you start to engage. They all need to understand the benefits of the use of any new technology or any new approach you may have to this kind of change that you might be proposing and advocating for. The other aspect too is, everyone likes to think about the concerns about change and what it could mean, but the truth is that doing nothing has its own inherent risk. As the world evolves around us and requires more of us by staying up with the latest technology, communicating those risks of doing nothing inside your organization becomes absolutely crucial as well. And then the last, and one of the things that we sometimes tend to get a little passive about, is that advocating for your proposal. So you will have done this work in order to advance your own professionalism, your own department's stature and ability to execute on the mission, to keep in compliance to your contracts. But what you need to do is remember, you need to keep advocating for your proposal, knowing it's the right thing to do, even in situations where you're feeling headwinds come at you. And so that advocating for your proposal becomes really key there. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and dive in. One thing I will note here is this topic is about communicating change and systemic change to your leadership. However, there is a slight leaning toward the defense industrial base here. However, all of this messaging applies to anyone who's supporting civilian agencies or is a civilian agency or might be a university. This is about asset management and being that property professional, that's ready to continue to advance their technology capability. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to run through this high-level agenda and we're going to dive into it. We're going to talk about the forces that continue to be at play in really driving this efficiency and this compliance in this operating environment that we're all subjected to today. We're going to talk about why the spotlight is on government property and possession of contractors. Specifically, that means you, that you're in the mission you're supporting. We'll talk about DCMA's role, if that's an organization that you interact with when it comes to auditing and the way that they see this perspective. And then also what the Department of Defense needs from government contractors. And it's a spoiler alert here, right? That it's good and accurate data. And that's something that is no news to any of you. It doesn't matter what area of the industry you're working in. It's good and accurate data is always what we continue to strive for in developing these technologies and these processes and procedures. We'll talk about what a modern government property management system looks like and how that can support your compliance. And we'll discuss the managing of risks. And at the end, as Scott mentioned, I'll address any questions. So let's get into it. I'm going to move pretty fast through these first few sections. The directorate, that is one of the major high-level forces. We've seen it for about a decade now. which is the Fire Directorate, Financial Improvement and Audit Readiness, which really is a DoD Pentagon-wide initiative to focus on financial management for improving internal controls, resolving the material weaknesses that the auditors have discovered, and advancing the department's fiscal stewardship. It focuses on property, plant, equipment, operating material, and supplies. So really a broad stroke of all these different aspects of responsibility that we all face every day. And it puts that highest priority on accounting controls and accountability for all mission critical asset information. And so, yeah, this FIRE initiative has been that overarching need for the DoD in particular, but all the agencies, in order to achieve that clean audit opinion, that book to floor and floor to book accountability for, you know, what the balance sheet says matches, you know, everything that happens prior to an asset being acquired or consumed. Next slide on that one. So we also see here that the GAO report has weighed in on this. And that comes back to 2023. The GAO identified, yeah, the DoD does lack this accountability, you know, as an outside auditor for government property and possession of contractors. And this has been a problem for quite a long time. And it affects the accounting and reporting of GFP as one of the reasons that DoD is unable to produce auditable financial statements. So the DoD's estimated the value of its GFP at over 220 billion. And I'm going to suggest, knowing the experience that we have, that that's probably a pretty conservative number. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see also that the 2024 defense audit results came in. And from within those results, the DoD still had 28 material weaknesses in the financial statement reporting, but the real spotlight was on the top 6, what they call scope limiting areas of government property and possession of contractors. And so that's one of the 6, is that scope limiting area. And that the statement was made that the components did not have the policies, procedures, and internal controls, the components, by the way, meaning the areas of the military, in place to consistently and accurately report government property and possession of contractors. So we're really looking right down the barrelhead here. And one of the things that Congress likes to do, of course, is when they want real action, they tie action to budget. And that's what you see in the last line here is 2024, the NDAA is increasing pressure for that clean audit opinion by 2028, and by attaching it to the budget, you know, they're expecting to see results. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to see DCMA's perspective on it. We all know that DCMA's guidebook is a published book, 100 some odd pages. It's what the DCMA uses as their guidelines to do these property management system analysis. And it's that systemic objective review and evaluation of your, as a contractor's, property management system to make sure it's providing the effective and efficient control of government property and compliance with all of the property clauses and the contract provisions that you know that you're being held to. And if you don't know those things because you're not being exposed to those things for some reason, you know, certainly it's your obligation to make sure you uncover them and figure out what they are, because this is the guidebook that DCMA marches to. So with that being said, if we go to the next slides, it's just a reinforcement of what we already know: compliance to the FAR 52-245-1. This is that government property clause that says, you know, you shall have a system of internal controls to manage government property and possession of contractors. This should become very familiar for everybody. Repeatable procedures and processes, record keeping, and methodologies to make sure that you can account for all of this responsible inventory and assets. Identify, manage, track, and report. is really the key message here. But knowing that you're continuing to take on more workload, the real question starts to become, how do you become more efficient here? How do you become more automated? And how can you advocate for those things up the chain of command to leadership so that you get what you need to be most effective in your job, in your role? Next slide. Okay, so this leads us into a reflection on the modern government property management. If you've heard my sessions before, you've heard me really reflect on this, because what happens, I've found, with the advancement of technologies is that we all get a technology, we all implement it in our environment, and then we start working our procedures in concert with that technology, and we develop sort of this roadmap of this is the way we do things. But meanwhile, and I can tell you from a technologist standpoint, technology continues to evolve and it continues to get better, whether it's the introduction of something like RFID technology or artificial intelligence is obviously the notion of the day we continue to hear more about. So all of these things are evolving while you have your current plan in place. So it takes time for you to sit back and reflect on, where am I today and what does it mean to be more advanced in the way that I implement this? Well, I always start in the upper right corner here, and I'm just going to go once around the clock on this, is that it begins with the most accurate and effective record keeping that you can achieve, because it's all about making sure your records are sustainably auditable. And I use that word sustainably very intentionally, because what it means to me to be sustainably auditable is that so that anytime somebody were to walk over to you and say, can I see your records for? Are you prepared for an audit next week? You have that ability and confidence to say, yeah, my records are reflecting what's going on in the real world. And so to me, the sustainability becomes important. And so the efficiency around keeping that record keeping where it needs to be becomes very important. Of course, the next one down is security. And we all hear about data security and the CMMC demands. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in this session, but how do you continue to protect government data at whatever level of sensitivity, but supports the mission for your organization and your obligations to do so. We also look at accessibility as a modern approach to government property management. And for accessibility, what I'm referring to is the variety of devices when we're doing our jobs day in and day out to be able to capture and update records in some kind of mobile device at the point of activity. So if I'm in the warehouse or I'm in the field and I've got the ability to use laptops or tablets or smartphones to be able to perform the functions I need to, that's accessibility coming to your fingertips so that you can perform those jobs or also distribute that requirement to have others perform those jobs, but all being captured in a consistent way with the checks and balances that are going to be updating your record keeping in in the most controlled way possible. The next one we hit is centralized. So we always know that maintaining the single pot of truth, as we call it, is a lot harder than it seems. Because if you have property administrators or others that are responsible for capturing and updating your records in various parts of your organization, and they might be in geographically separated parts of your organization, that ability to keep it all consistent and central becomes a huge imperative here, so that you know that your assets are matching what's happening in the real world. So that becomes a real serious part of the way a modern system should be deployed. Also, automation. And so as I stress the importance of efficiency today, automation becomes key to that efficiency. And I think we're going to see it also later on in this Asset Management Awareness Month about the use of barcode in your asset management needs. Also, RFID is very real and extremely effective in these environments today, and has been proven over and over again to work very, very effectively. The use of mobility and mobile computing technologies. And then fixed readers, which is an RFID reference. So the use of fixed readers is by positioning readers in various parts of your operation so that as items are moving around your organization without any human involvement, your organization is autonomously capturing and updating any movement of assets or inventory, so your record keeping is staying automatically up to date at that moment of time, in real time when it's happening. And then the last thing is integrated. So integrated means, are you doing a data exchange with the systems that need your data or that can provide you accurate data? You know, maybe you have a receiving system that is not your property management system, and you can benefit from the receipt of items that are coming in through another system, such as an ERP system, that could feed your government property management system. And then on the other side, once you have all of your data in the format you need it to report to government, are you submitting directly through to government systems like PI, instead of having to go through the portal and in a very arduous process of retyping all that information into the PI system that actually really risks data accuracy, because we know by hand typing information into another system is only adding a lot of variable to the way that we transfer data, and of course a lot of wasted time and labor. So integration becomes a key, but what a modern property management system is not, and I'm getting the sense that this audience really understands this now, is it's not spreadsheets. And there's a number of reasons why spreadsheets really are inadequate for this kind of function. They are not transactional. So in other words, keeping records with transactions of who performed what against a record is not possible with spreadsheets. They also can't handle the use of auto ID technology like barcode and RFID, so you lose that ability for automation. They're not they often come with a lot of potential errors. You know, we've all seen how easy it is to convert a column where it might be an NSN number and it becomes a telephone number before you know it. So spreadsheets, you know, really can be very error prone, and things can go sideways quickly in a spreadsheet, especially if you have multiple people trying to access it. And the last is that it really can't handle the automated reporting through to other systems as well. So we look at it to say, how can you not only maintain that effective control of your records, but in an efficient and automated way, and in a very, very risk-free way. So that's today's modern government property management. So let's give you a few examples, right? We've talked a little theoretical here, but if we go to the next slide, we can see some examples. What I like to illustrate is the effective use of barcode and or RFID as a way of performing inventories. Little bit of a eye chart here in the upper left corner, but it's an illustration of about 10 or so records of somebody who may need to be performing an inventory with the use of mobility and barcode or RFID. As we see on the asset list, we see all the item IDs, the names, the serial numbers, and part numbers, as well as the asset classes and locations. So we imagine someone's walking into an area, let's say the warehouse, and they want to scan the items doing a cycle count. What's happening on the mobile computing side is these industrial touch computers are connected directly to the network, as long as there's Wi-Fi connectivity in that area. And it allows the users to scan and update using barcode or RFID all of the items that have been assigned to them inside that cycle count that'll appear right on the mobile computer screen. So as they're pulling the trigger, they can see how many items they're responsible for capturing. It could be 15 in this particular case. And when they capture all 15, it'll update this right back to the main database. And you can see the updated inventory date and time happens in real time. There's no waiting to have to go back and cradle to upload. But it also, by working this data in real time, it allows the users to reconcile right on the mobile. So they know the 15 they're looking for, and perhaps they get only 14 of the 15. They can immediately identify the one that's missing and go resolve that one. They might have to go search in another location or area to find that one item. Or if they're in a warehouse where something was misplaced on a different shelf or location, RFID is a huge benefit to that one missing. You can go into a Pro Locate on the mobile using the RF signal to scan that warehouse to find that one item that's gone missing and allow someone to go resolve that issue and either accept it in the new location or bring it back to the existing location where it should have been. On top of it, it also, if you find that you have more than the allocated 15 items in that given area, if you have one or two more items, then of course the person that's doing the cycle count can be empowered to resolve that situation as well. Maybe they need to accept those items into the new location. And not only did you just also improve your accuracy there, but also you save somebody who's about to do the next cycle count next week, for instance, from having to say, hey, we're missing a couple of items in this other area. Where are they? Well, you will have accounted them in the area that you're currently located. So there's a lot of benefits, again, of mobility and auto ID to handling those functions at the point of activity and not having this going back and forth between manually processing, uploading, and having to walk back and forth to desktop PCs. Now, with that being said, really what we see next here is we see what happens when we have that asset lifecycle history. And taking just one asset in the detail we want to analyze here, we can see from the bottom up any activity that was performed against, in this case, a transmission. We can see that when the record was created, exactly the date and time, when it was edited, and then when this item has moved from one location to another, when it was inventoried, exact date and time, by who had performed those moves, when they were performed, and any further details that would be associated if there was any additional forensics that was needed for any reason about these different kinds of transactions. This is the use of a transactional database. This is what I think some number of people on this session understands, that this becomes part of the audit trail that becomes crucial to maintaining your controlled record keeping in the most efficient way possible. Another example, if we go to the next slide, allows us to look into the role of these government systems. So we know this very large e-commerce platform that the DoD is maintaining. It's called PI. PI has various modules underneath, from WAF to the GFP module to the IUID registry. When you're submitting to WAF, you're submitting your invoices and your receipt acceptances of new procurements. When you're doing your GFP module, you've got your attachments, your shipments and receipts, updates and disposals. For a lot of you, that relates back to the DD 1149 processing. And then, of course, the IUID registry, that is all the unique identification behind those key assets that live behind the scenes there. The point about calling this out is that when you have all of this data already maintained in your current government property management system, there's no need to go retype this information back into these portals. There is a direct data exchange capability going into PI that allows you to directly go to that system with just a couple of clicks of the mouse, so that in batch you can upload hundreds and hundreds of items directly into Pi without having to rekey or re-enter anything. And that really is the epitome of data exchange. When you've got your system that understands the needs of the government system and how you can 1 or 2 clicks get all of that data migrated through. So let's talk about a couple of examples of the use of these government systems. So in reporting to the GFP module, maybe similar to what your DD1149s would reflect. And that's, by the way, that's another thing to recognize is when your system has all this DD1149 data, you should be able to just have 1 click to produce those DD1149 forms that you may need to accompany any kind of DD1149 related transaction, which could be many, many things, as we know. But reporting to the GFP module here in an electronic capacity, what you want to do is have your system understand, let's say, the batch of these 10 items that need to get transmitted to the GFP module. It will allow you to detect any errors, any missing data that needs to be resolved before the data gets submit and batch data exchange up through to these systems. So if you're missing some custody contract information, it will tell the user before they're allowed to submit. Now, also recognize that all of this resolution could mean updating your IUID information. All of it is to protect so that when you submit the data, it's the best possible data, the most accurate data before you submit this data in batch. And what will happen is the GFP module will report back when it's accepted any information into the system and anything else that might need to be corrected downstream if some additional information was to be required. But now you have a real communication line going through to the Pi system in a much more thoughtful way. So when you get that feedback here as an example, you can see that the registration took place on that date and time, it was confirmed, and that you could see an email reflects whatever was being registered or reported through to those government systems. In this case, the GFP module. Thanks for that, Dave. Excuse me a moment. So this is a perspective of data management. When we use the phrase data management, we're talking about the way to leverage the current database you have to manage all of the appropriate information in the way that it's managed not only into your system, but as it expands up into government systems. So if you're managing property or end items, this would be a good way to look at how is your system supporting you and how are you automating those transactions. Your IUID data also can be submitted directly, along with your shipments and your receipts of government property. Lifecycle updates and disposals, as well as, like I said, those forms, the DD250s or DD1149s can be automatically generated. And again, you become really more of the go-between of this data, since you know that that's part of the responsibility in your organization to meeting these contract compliance obligations. Next slide, Dave. So we talked about data security. I'm going to go through this quickly. This is really up to your organization, but for your awareness, I'm going to cover it. So that CMMC I mentioned earlier is the cybersecurity framework for the defense industrial base. It is to protect sensitive information from cyber attacks, quite simply. When you maintain, at minimum, controlled unclassified information. So your data must be secured according to the standard. You all very well may be aware of this. Every organization in the defense industrial base in particular, and even civilian agencies, are dealing with this. We hit a big data security milestone this past year, and it's referred to as the CMMC, the 32 CFR Part 170. That's the first step in getting this requirement baked into policy. And the second step is forecasted for this year, mid-year, which is the 48 CFR Part 204 that will facilitate the official DFARS rule change. In other words, this is going to start appearing more overtly in the contracts your organization receives. So this will impact you. And the bottom line for all of this is your systems, the system included, need to meet these security requirements. So make sure that you're in a hosted environment or you're with a provider that you know can absolutely meet these security requirements to protect the data that you're relying on their technology to help you protect. Next one. So that gives you a couple of options here to consider. As a provider of technology and cloud-based technology, I can tell you that we see both of these every day in the way that we deploy our government property management systems. They can be hosted in our secure cloud. And the benefits of that can be there's no in-house servers that are required. So your IT department doesn't need to worry about this. It becomes a very low overhead item for them, which of course IT departments love. Overnight software updates can be provided to you. So as these technologies advance, new features become available, you get the benefit of that. And they, of course, are going to be hosted in a secure FedRAMP certified hosted environment. And for supportability, hosting in a vendor cloud can be very helpful because it often becomes a much faster time to resolution on any issues that may come up. That's either data related or tech related, whatever the case may be. Now, it may be required that you have to go on-prem too. So that allows you to host inside your own firewall, making sure that you can control all of that sensitive data, the configurations around it, the security around it. Sometimes it's easier to meet your organization's security compliance requirements if you have this data being maintained inside your own firewall as well. Depends on what level of security compliance you feel your organization feels the need to be elevated to in this particular case. Again, this could apply to both defense industrial base or it could apply to any federal agencies or any contractors supporting those agencies. Okay, so that takes us to the next slide, which is let's talk about the messaging to leadership. Let's reflect for a moment of the big three. I like to refer to them. You've got your contracts, right? So your contracts, the risk of non-compliance is if your PMSA does not pass, you very much could get a corrective action. It's possible if that corrective action elevates that possible funds could be withheld. And we've seen examples of this all across the board where there's corrective actions that someone has a limited time frame to make adjustments to it. My recommendation is absolutely get it well ahead of this because you don't want to have to deal with corrective action and under pressure dealing with this kind of situation. Also, your reputation. So your customers and their program offices need your data to pass their audits. So this isn't really all just about you. It's about your customers' needs at this point. And so you need to know that when they come knocking on your door, you need to be prepared. You know, one of the things that's changed with this consolidated DFARS clause is that the time window for you to report all of this data to them is really reduced, or actually has definition now, down to 7 days for reporting this data. So when they knock on your door, you absolutely need to be prepared to submit that data in all of its accuracy. And then the third is competitiveness. And we have seen this now time and time again. Organizations are leveraging your profession, this area of operation, for being more competitive. It's implementing some of the latest in automation technologies to be more efficient, be more automated and more accurate with using barcode or RFID technologies or both, but certainly data exchange to other systems. Make sure that you're not in jeopardy of losing your existing contracts, so protect the current contract base you have. but also set your contract bid team to win future contracts. Have them so that they're coming to you to know what you're doing and how you're supporting your organization that supports their customer, the government, and be that enabler to become more competitive in that. So most of all, don't wait to get called out for not having the right system in place, which leads me to what you really need to do to speak to leadership here, which is the message to your program leaders is in the defense space, DoD is shining that spotlight on government property management and possession of contractors. Failed defense audits are driving this need. And your data is what the government needs, which feeds your customers, accountable property systems of record, or your APSRs. DCMA is formalizing their audit approach to PMSAs, adding pressure to implement these modern systems. And just as you no longer manage your financials on a spreadsheet, managing government property on a spreadsheet is just not enough anymore. And the majority of you get that. And investing in a modern system means that it's central and it's secure, it's accessible and it's integrated, and it leverages automation for time savings and accuracy, and ultimately that more efficient way in which you can operate and do business today. So again, avoid putting your contracts at risk. Think about where you are today with the way that you set up your procedures and your technology, and think about how can you advance that in today's climate so that you're becoming as effective in your role as possible with the increased amount of workload that's coming along with it. So hopefully this message, and as Scott mentioned before, this is a slide deck that's going to come to you if you want it or however it gets distributed. But this message here that we can provide, you can use as an aid to get the attention of your program leaders. So with that being said, Dave, why don't you take us to the last? If there are any questions, I'm certainly willing to take any questions that may have come up.
Hi, Peter. I do have one question that's come in. He says, thank you. He's researching RFID and wanted to know if there is a demo video out there that he could use to help explain to his leadership and give proof of concept.
Yeah, great question. So yes is the answer to that. Thankfully, Dave here is on this session, and I think Dave, if you don't mind stepping in and we can share a few links on how RFID is being used in these environments and how they can create benefit for the organization. So
sure, I can share links, but it's also on the A2B Tracking YouTube page, but I'll share links.
Okay, great.
All right, a couple more questions have come in. How well does RFID work in an outdoor environment?
RFID, so let's qualify first. So when we refer to as RFID, in the majority of cases at A2B, we're referring to passive RFID. So that means that you're dealing with RFID tags that require no maintenance, no battery source that ever needs to be changed out. So when you're dealing with outdoor environments, what comes to mind for me is that you might be dealing with rolling stock in an outdoor, maybe a airfield, or maybe you're dealing with a stockyard or where inventory is being managed outside. In these particular cases, using RFID is a very smart idea. The tag selection for how you tag those assets or that inventory becomes an important step in the process, but there are numerous different kinds of tags that can withstand all kinds of external environmental conditions, from rain and snow to hot and colds, various conditions without problem. And what becomes important with RFID, and I can't emphasize enough, is it's all about performance. In other words, when you tag an item, you want to make sure that with high degree of predictability that those tags can be read from the desired distance. And so that requires a deeper discussion to identify that relationship between readers and tags on certain asset types in outdoors. So if you're interested in having further discussion on that, please contact us and we'd be happy to get into it. But there's many examples of how it can be used very successfully in outdoors.
All right, I have another question. Are you aware of any commercially available software that can allow access to the USG as well?
More definition on USG? Is that pi? Is that the question? Oh, let's assume it's pi for a moment.
Okay.
So if it's pi, in other words, how do you exchange data directly through to pi from a commercially available product? That's A2B tracking. So that's the only one that I'm familiar with. There may be others, but I know that A2B, we've been doing it for 20 years, directly submitting directly through to pi in the U.S. government, if that stands for USG, through a global exchange network we have set up, so everything can be properly and securely transmitted over to the pi system directly. So thanks for that question.
Here's another one. What statute or regulation can we point to that requires agencies to have the type of system that you're speaking of?
So for agencies, and this is I don't have a really good answer for this, Dave. I don't know if you can back me up. Is there something that resonates for you on this topic?
No, I'm not sure how to respond to that either.
Yeah, it's a fair question, and I think we'd have to do a little research offline to give you a better accurate answer.
All right, another question. As an employee in this challenging environment, what would you say is the most important thing we need to sharpen our skills on relative to overall management concepts?
Well, I'll speak from a technologist perspective. And I've implemented technology for 30 years in these kind of environments, very hands-on, myself inside the warehouse, out in the fields, wherever the case may be. And there are a number of moving parts from a manager's perspective that need to be maintained for successful deployment of technology. And I'll speak to just technology. And I think it's in recognition of you're providing tech as an enabling tool to make somebody's job better. That's the concept, right? A lot of times it may not be so obvious to the person who needs to learn this technology that it's making their life better. And I think as much as you need to be able to communicate to the stakeholders in leadership why technology is important for you to advance the change you need to see in your organization, you also need to do it to your team. And that is make sure you're expressing the benefits of the technology and how this is going to be a more effective, a better team to deliver the goods of what's, the promises that you need to keep, the obligations to your contract. So think about it in both ways, not only up chain to leadership, but also to your existing team, because the more you can get them on board with the adoption of this technology, it's just going to end up, the overall reasons behind this tech and how you can leverage it for your benefit is just going to become much more clear to you and to your organization.
All right, coming back to that question where you asked if it was PI related, they elaborated for the government customer to be able to view their assets, and then they go on to say, we have a few contracts that we use .mil instances where the government PMO can also view their assets in our database or in their database.
Okay, so if the need here is so that you're offering the government an opportunity to view into the database or even a certain segment of your database, my experience with A2B as being our platform is that you can isolate certain views or user logins so that they can actually account for specifically just their assets. And presumably, maybe you're maintaining numerous contracts, which many do, and you don't want them to see all your contracts. You can allow them in to view just the contracts that they need to see inside the platform at A2B. If you do need that data, we get a lot of requests, can the data exchange with DPass? So they can log into their DPass and see it as well. That's enough. The answer is yes to that. You can do that as well. So there's a couple different ways to accomplish it.
All right. Are there any case studies you can provide where a university or company lost funding due to failing their PMSA?
That's a really great question. I'll ask Dave to take a look at that in the background. But the fact is a lot of organizations who may have had that happen to them don't really care to publicize it, as you might imagine. So that's a hard one to come by. However, we definitely have examples of where corrective actions have been the start of this case study, maybe not so severe as losing funding or getting a contract taken away. But I can tell you both of those examples I've witnessed firsthand from, number of, contractor organizations that are household names. So, but I'm sure we can surface a few case studies that get pretty close to that example for you.
All right. There's another for automation management. Is there a range that it is limited to?
I think I would need more on that one. I could go in a lot of directions.
Okay. What types of frequent reports and timeline, monthly, quarterly, yearly, would be good to provide your leadership to demonstrate how property management is an important asset for the organization?
Oh, that's a really thoughtful question. So from my perspective as a leader of an organization and my experience in working with so many property professionals over the course of years, I think a cadence of a quarterly makes most sense. That kind of update can allow someone to stay engaged at the appropriate level, provide any updates or changes that may have happened over the past month, any new plans to implement any advancements over the coming months ahead. So I really am a big fan of a quarterly cadence in that case to leadership.
Thank you. And then one last question. How might AI play a role in systems integration?
Well, I can express to you what I think AI can do to support this system capability from a property manager standpoint. And I think it comes down to when we're all managing so much data on a day-to-day basis, it's hard to see sort of the forest through the trees, so to speak. And that means that, we all find ourselves needing more and better reporting. And I think what we're going to see coming here is with AI, the ability to help us sift through the data with the right language model, and the right AI tool that can help us, be a lot more thoughtful about when we need to report data, both from an internal auditing perspective, so you're better prepared, and then from when it comes to the external audits. So it can provide a better picture with some language models and some tools that are becoming more available in the market. So that's what I would mostly focus on in terms of where AI can be applied.
All right, we've reached the 2-minute mark, but or 2 o'clock mark, but there is one other question if you,
Sure.
Okay. It says, can this A to B tracking system be useful for fleet management, or do you know if there are other systems that would be better for fleet?
I think there are better systems for fleet management than A to B. We've had, vehicles and fleets, I'd say used inside the A to B platform for tracking purposes, but I think the notion of what fleet management, what you need to do would require, a more evolved system that can support that. I don't have any good recommendations standing here today. But yeah, I think it might be a little bit light for your requirements if you tried to use A to B.
Thank you, Peter. That's it for the questions. Thank you so much for your time. Scott, I don't know if you are still here, if you wanted to pop in and say anything else, but we appreciate you, Peter and Dave, for being here with us today and presenting your expertise.
Yeah, just to echo what Lisa said, thank you very much, Peter and Dave, for presenting today. Thank you, everybody online for joining us, and we're excited to see you next week on Tuesday, March 11th at 2 p.m. Eastern for our next AM presentation. So with that, thank you very much and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great
And
day.
guys, the compliments are rolling in. So thanks for doing this.
Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.